Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Chart Your Path series. This episode is focused on volunteering to the boardroom. I am Alice Clementi, the volunteer CEO of the charity Charterpath, which I co-founded with Alex in 2020. I'm also a school governor, a trustee board member of Operation Reach, and mum of two very small children. When I'm not on maternity leave, I also have my own consultancy business building on my training as a chartered accountant and 15 years of corporate experience in the banking sector across finance, credit, and risk. I am joined today by my co-founder, Alex, who has a long career in volunteering and has progressed now to board and advisory roles, also in the financial services and banking sectors. He will share more about his career in this episode, so I don't want to steal his thunder. So over the next half an hour, we are going to start with a quick introduction to Charterpath. We will then hear more from Alex about his experiences of volunteering and how it has helped prepare him for board roles. And then we'll finish off with some reflections, some tips about how you can go about finding a volunteer role on a charity board, and any further questions from the audience today. So a quick introduction to Charterpath. Charterpath is on a mission to chart a path between charities and volunteers with financial skills. Alex and I co-founded Charterpath with a vision of a charity sector that is financially sustainable, allowing charities to really focus on their mission and maximize their impact. By charting a path between charities and volunteers with financial skills, we aim to help charities better manage their resources, navigate financial challenges, and deliver lasting change for their communities. We aim to do this in three ways. First of all, to inspire more finance professionals to volunteer their skills and time to nonprofits. Second of all, to connect nonprofits with and charities with diverse and expert volunteers with financial skills. And finally, to engage with the wider sector so that volunteering is a core part of every finance professional's career. We launched Charterpath in 2020 at a time when charities were facing unprecedented financial challenges during the pandemic. And these challenges have really only intensified with the cost of living crisis, and over a third of UK charities now at risk of closure. To date, you can see that we have built a diverse community of over 2,200 finance professionals, contributing over 20,000 pro bono hours to the charity sector. We have supported over 250 charities across the UK, and in total contributed more than £1 million of pro bono value to the charity sector. So this episode we're turning the tables and we're focusing on Alex, who normally asks the questions. As many of you may know, volunteering has got enormous benefits for you as an individual, as well as for the charities that you might support as a volunteer. So that might be meeting new people, learning new skills, and benefiting your mental health. And in the same way, it can have great benefits for your professional career. So enhancing your CV, helping you to stand out from your peers, and really giving you experience that can help boost your professional career. So for example, maybe gaining boardroom experience. There were really two things that prompted us to organize today's session. Firstly, we often get questions about board roles at charities and what they involve. Who can become a trustee of a charity? And secondly, we hear a lot from people who are wanting to make a move from executive roles into non-executive roles, board roles, and finding it quite hard to find those opportunities. And volunteering on a charity board can be a really great way to gain that vital experience and act as a stepping stone for a corporate board role. So I want to join by Alex, and we can hear all about how he has managed to do that and develop his career through volunteering. Welcome, Alex. So a bit of background to yourself first, if you wouldn't mind, please, and share with us how you got into volunteering, and maybe whether it was something that you did right from the start with professional goals in mind.
Thank you, Alice. So cool to be here. It's awesome to join and be the one being asked the questions rather than asking the questions. So thank you for the chance to join today. So I sort of almost go back to the very start of my sort of childhood. I grew up in the centre of Brighton where I live now, not from a particularly privileged kind of upbringing. grew up in a two-bed house, sharing a bedroom with my two brothers. But for me, education from a very early age was felt like a real opportunity to have kind of more choices in the rest of my life, and went to a really great state schools in the centre of Brighton, and that became the stepping stone in a way to. I was fortunate enough to go on to then study at the University of Cambridge, and again that gave me more opportunities in terms of what has now been nearly 20 years in financial and professional services. And it was in that sort of professional career when we had our daughter that we moved back to Brighton, and I was kind of prompted to start what I call my kind of volunteering career. And it was while working in London, we had the opportunity to do reading with children in our local community. So just a couple of miles from our office was in central London. We travelled across to Tower Hamlets, and it was a real eye opener seeing helping young people to read, where 10, 11 years old, but with struggling to read books that maybe I was reading for my daughter at the time, who was 4 or 5 years old. And you kind of realize the barriers that was meaning for those kids in terms of their future life and opportunities, ones I've been kind of fortunate enough to work through. And yeah, so it sort of linked back to that passion for sort of education and choice. When we moved back to Brighton, I became a school governor alongside work life, and particularly with the what we call the finance link governor. So I was responsible for looking at the finances and challenge and oversight the finances. So played to my training as a chartered accountant. And
So
really just
it wasn't really the kind of volunteering with a professional aim in mind. It just so
no,
happened
it was just
that connection.
yeah, it was linked to the passion. Like I wanted to do something to support, more kids who came from a similar background to myself, and face some of the similar barriers potentially to get into university or go on to professional careers. And so I felt like I could do that with a school, literally a mile from our house. Started volunteering there, and again, just really caught like the volunteering bug. And I always talk about kind of volunteering as being very much like a professional career. That volunteering role there opened up opportunities to then become a trustee of a charity. So I sit on a couple of trustee boards. And obviously, all the way through to us wanting to start our own charity at Charterpath, and now act as chair of trustees there. So it's been, I see it as very much like a journey in my volunteering career, but it was born out of that sort of passion and desire to help other people, but particularly around education as a route to do that.
Thanks so much. And I suppose just for people that are new to us and maybe unfamiliar, do you want to just share with us briefly what a trustee role involves in terms of sitting on a trustee board of a charity?
Yeah, sure. So in my professional life, I've spent time working with managing teams, and progressed through. I was fortunate enough to progress through to like executive and board roles in my professional life. So all the way through to I was the UK CEO of Klarna, the Swedish payments and shopping app, and was there, sort of running that board and leading the activities across that board. A charity trustee is very similar in the sense of sitting on the board of that charity, more like what it is like to be a non-executive director. So rather than kind of running the day-to-day activities or operations, it's more that kind of challenge, support, advice that you can provide to the executive team to help them, steer the right strategy of the organization, oversee the finances of the organization. That's very much what, a trustee role is like. So, and similar to what a school governor role is like too. So that opportunity to sit on that board and help steer that school in the right direction. So for me, it was kind of like parallels to what I was kind of doing in my professional life, but sort of on the other side of the table in terms of in the non-profit sector or charity sector, but also in a more of a non-executive, so not responsible for the day-to-day activities, more of an oversight and strategy role.
And so, how do you think that those skills that you gained on the charity boards really helped you in your executive career or in your professional career, your day
Yes, yeah, exactly, and it really has. So if I look back on my professional career, I am, it was a bit of a roller coaster in terms of have moments where you feel like you take on your first manager role and you're responsible for a team, and the skills you're developing there, and then suddenly I was sitting on boards as a one of the executive team all the way through to CEO. But there were times when maybe I wasn't making the progress that I wanted, or I wasn't necessarily getting the opportunities or the experience I wanted. And actually, when I took on that role as a governor, very quickly by being the finance link governor, I was suddenly found myself, for example, chairing our finance committee for the school. So I was getting that experience suddenly of like chairing a committee and setting the agenda for that committee, setting out the plan for the year ahead, the priorities of that committee, working with people of all different backgrounds and skill sets, working and coordinating their efforts to achieve our goals, particularly in that case on the finance committee. So then suddenly when you get that opportunity where, my professional life, I remember particularly when I was at Klarna, there were just things coming my way that I'd never expected, where suddenly you'd be asked to go and chair a round table and you'd have other business leaders, you'd have representatives from government and regulators, and you had to, chair this try and get some output of this kind of working group or round table discussion. It wasn't things that were in my sort of day-to-day wheelhouse from my professional career, but actually having done similar types of activity in my volunteering life, you suddenly find yourself feeling at least you have a concept of what you're trying to achieve, and you feel
Yeah,
like you can do it, you can
a
give
bit
it a
more
go at
confident.
least. Yeah. So very helpful in terms of sort of complementing. And then they end up, I feel, going very much hand in hand. Because like from a professional career, I've actually now having like, moved on from my role at Klarna, I've now actually moved across more to, you touched on up front, sort of board advisory and non-exec director and chair roles, but in the sort of corporate world rather than charity sector world. And again, suddenly you find the skills that actually I've been developing in the non-profit sector become hugely relevant because that it is very different now. I'm having to not meddle in the day-to-day, but stay at that kind of top level strategic space with those businesses.
Yeah.
And
I'd
it's
love
really helped.
I'd love to explore that a bit more in terms of the actual skills that you think boards look for, which I'm guessing are the same for both boards on a charity as well as boards in the corporate sector. What would you say are those key skills that they're looking for?
So it's interesting because again, if I look back on my career, I trained as a chartered accountant actually primarily because I loved numbers. Like, I sort of came up from a sort of maths and science background. My mum was a maths teacher, studied chemistry at university. Um, but then also I just loved learning. Like, I found that was sort of had become that sort of route to progress and development and choice. And so that was very much why I trained as a chartered accountant at the start of my professional career. I probably wasn't ever the best technical accountant, if I'm honest, or I trained as an auditor. I probably wasn't the best auditor out there. Um, but I really love the sort of the process of, using those skills and learning those skills and building those foundation blocks. And they've been hugely helpful in my professional career, all the way through to sort of CEO and understanding the numbers and be able to challenge numbers and build financial plans and forecasts. But I would say I probably had tried to steer away from sort of the accountant sort of identity, I suppose. So move from finance roles into strategy roles, operations, board roles, all different types of activities. But actually, come full circle, those accountancy skills have become like the superpower. So when you're looking at a board, suddenly when they're looking to recruit board members, those finance skills, financial skills, analytical skills, accountancy skills, they're the most in demand. Like, recent report from DFE where actually sort of financial and accounting skills is the most in-demand skill set on school governing boards and very much similar to what charities are looking for. So that's been sort of my routine has been through skill-based volunteering. So it's like that I can bring to you financial skills. I can help you sort of improve the rigor and oversight and challenge of our finances to make us more sustainable as a charity or a school. Um, Add to that though, skills that you're both practicing and trying to develop in your professional life sort of the ability, communication is absolutely key. So being able to sort of articulate your view or collective views is really important and to sort of take a step back as part of that communication. I would say the ability to listen and absorb is hugely important and sort of trying to understand different perspectives. I think that's one of the things I love about, for example, being the volunteer side of my life has been working with people completely different lived experience, different backgrounds, different skill sets. Maybe it's marketing, maybe it's law, maybe it's HR, or commercial, completely different skills, and sort of being able to listen and assimilate all the different sort of information that's coming from those different perspectives. Um, a really important one, which I have battled with, but I'm hopefully making progress on, is that ability to take it up a level and not meddle and try and control the day to day. Like, I loved that from an executive career side was to roll your sleeves up and get involved in everything and really try and shape what you're doing and sort of influence the outcomes you're achieving. It is different in a sort of both a non-exec director in the corporate world or a trustee or governor role in the charity sector side. You do have to, you are more custodial rather than, executor.
Mm.
And that's not doesn't come naturally to everyone. I think it is something though that you can practice and develop, and it goes back to why volunteering can be so good, and it really helped me because I felt like I'd proven to myself that I could do that. There's only a certain amount of hours I could give to say the school as a volunteer, so you couldn't get involved down in the absolute detail. Plus, I'm not a teacher, so ultimately you are reliant on a lot of the skill and expertise that the executive or in that case school leadership team are bringing.
Yeah, it's probably a good time to mention also that at a charity, depending on the size of the charity, that role as a board member does vary a bit, doesn't it? So for people like you and I who quite enjoy doing very hands-on work, sometimes as a trustee at a very small charity, you're doing a bit of the doing, but as you say, your ultimate responsibility is the oversight and making sure that you're kind of sticking to your fiduciary responsibilities of stewarding the charity.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the real
Strengths, a bit of both.
yeah, well, I think one of the real joys of volunteering is that you can get that mixture, or you can find the right type of role and the right size of organization to suit that. So I've absolutely had that from supporting very small charities where, we're in the spreadsheets, you're helping them to create a 3-year plan, real basics of creating, a spreadsheet 3-year plan with projections through to helping to review the financial statements. Look, we do a lot of that at Charterpath. That's one of the things that I enjoy there for you and I is, we are literally creating the accounts for our charity. It goes back to sort of your original training in debits and credits, etc. But then all the way through to, now, so the school where I'm involved in, I spent 4 years there as chair of governors. I've, had time both as the chair of the finance committee, but also a member of the finance committee. We're looking at a budget of £8 million a year, how it's being spent, how we can make savings, how we can restructure the school. And it's very much that, expansion of the school we've had to make the financials work. So, you're suddenly then operating at a much more kind of strategic level. And again, so helpful, those skills to then take back into the professional world. And I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't have been able to make that transition across to the sort of the non-exec director type roles that I'm now working in purely based on my executive career. It's probably more typical to be doing that maybe slightly later on in your career. And often people can struggle to find that first non-exec director role. But actually, the experience they gained in the volunteer sector and sort of evidencing, large scale, large figures, was able to give the reassurance that I could take that step away from being executive to being a non-executive director.
It's really interesting. I mean, thinking about the practicalities of it, we know that one of the top reasons people don't volunteer is due to lack of time, and particularly alongside a full-time professional career. So that very much applies. People will be nervous maybe about taking on a board role and over committing. Like, how do you find that you balance it and the conflicting demands of your different roles, both executive and then a non-executive volunteer career alongside it?
Yeah, I would say when I think about, so I was working at Close Brothers, which is a UK merchant bank, when I really started volunteering on like a recurring basis. There's a few ways to do this. Before that, I was doing more ad hoc volunteering. So when we were sort of reading with children in our lunch breaks, that was sort of, you do it for 8 weeks, you did it at lunchtime, it could fit around your work duties very easily. It didn't require much preparation time. You could just, hop in the sort of minibus or taxi over to the school and do that. And actually, there are lots of opportunities, skill-based volunteering as well, in terms of using your finance skills, which can be ad hoc or for a certain amount of time. When I made that transition to a more what I'd call like a recurring volunteer role, so that's when I became a school governor for the first time. It was quite a big decision. It was a commitment. We have meetings a couple of times a term. I was chairing a committee, so you had to prepare for those sort of offline as well. The way I managed that, school governor roles work very well because they're often in the evening and outside of school hours, so I could fit that around work life fine. But then very quickly I got offered to be relatively short notice. I've been a governor there for just over a year to be the chair of governors, and that was quite a different remit and responsibility. And yeah, exactly. So I was there sort of during expansion of the school all the way then through to like lockdown and pandemic. And I did speak to my line manager then about that, said, look, this is a time commitment. Fortunately at the time, Close Brothers was supportive of volunteering, and I could primarily fit it around my work. But it was worth having that conversation. I would always encourage people, particularly if you're taking on a recurring role and you might need to just have a bit of flexibility, or your employer might have a certain number of hours or days that they'll let you volunteer and support that within your work time, which is definitely worth asking about. So that was manageable. It was tough during the pandemic, but mainly fitted outside. It was almost like having my evening job at times during the pandemic when I was chair of governors. Now, though, as I've moved to more sort of a portfolio of roles, both professional in terms of non-exec director, board advisory, and obviously we've got Charterpath, and I sit on a couple of other charity boards, still involved in the school. I very much have to be incredibly disciplined from a diary management perspective, and I'd really encourage that for everyone. You have to I block out time in my diaries. I plan my time, many months ahead to avoid conflicts. If I need to rearrange things to avoid that, rather than it being sort of last minute and not being able to attend, plan everything far in advance, and treat it very much all of my roles in the same balanced way as if they're all, I have commitments to them, and I need to meet them. One thing I would say to anyone who's looking to volunteer or is volunteering and struggling with time, always worth communicating. So, we've had both myself, I've had certain periods of time, for example, when I sold business to Klarna that's how I joined Klarna in 2019, I was exceptionally busy and, had to speak to the head teacher at the school and others, say, look, over the coming months, there's going to be limits to how much time I can give you. Very nice response from the head teacher at the time, which was say, look, as a volunteer, I'm grateful for every single hour that you're able to give us and would never, have an issue if you can't. So I think it goes back to sort of communication if you have got barriers around time commitment, but it's being organized, it's blocking time in diaries so that you've got it scheduled, you can meet your work commitments, but also, meet your volunteer commitments or be proactive if you're going to struggle to share the load with other trustees or volunteers.
I like the point about the communication because, as you say, it does work both ways. So at the end of the day, you're gaining so much from the volunteer experience, like you were being a chair, that in most corporates, would be mad not to recognize that and support you in doing it because it's sort of developing you as an individual. And then at the same time, as you say, the charities also recognize that you've got boundaries that you need to stick to. So yeah, really great point. Just thinking, so what advice to sort of finish on the kind of Q&A specifically would you give for someone looking to leverage volunteering as a specific pathway to board roles? Like, are there specific types of volunteer roles or organizations that you would recommend for those aspiring to take on a board position in their executive career?
So, I mean, I go back to, for me, skill-based volunteering and use of my financial skills has been, it opened sort of the wedge in the door, if you see what I mean, of my volunteer career. And then that, in turn, acted as almost like the wedge in the door of my non-executive director career. So, like, I now am chair of two finance audit and risk committees of two different businesses, and in a non-exec director capacity. But again, specifically tied to my finance, skills that I've developed through my career. So I think that would be like the core of it. It's my passion for Charterpath, and is that it can be a benefit for the charity or the school that you're volunteering, but it's benefit for us in terms of developing our skills, being able to practice those financial skills, but develop those broader skills we talked about, like communication, stakeholder management, and influencing, taking a strategic lens. So that would be like the entry point. One piece of advice I would say, which is you'll often find people start volunteering sort of at latter point of their professional career, and that it can be sort of to give them a sense of purpose, or like they've had success in their professional career, they want to give back at that stage. But actually, my advice would be start that volunteering career as early as you can, because often I'll find people want to start volunteering maybe later end of their career, and they want to be like grabbed by big name charities, National, Oxfam, and others, big charities, and they realize they're maybe not able to secure those volunteer roles because they're up against people who maybe have volunteered a lot in their career, have experience of chairing, a charity's finance committee or equivalent, and suddenly that they can't maybe access those roles. So yeah, I'm a real advocate of start early, get those skills, run it in parallel with your professional career, and get that kind of crossover between the two, and they go hand in hand the whole way through. And then suddenly, as I found myself, you've got these opportunities both in my volunteer career where I've suddenly finding charities or organizations getting in touch with me, asking me to be rather than applying. And then similarly, it's opened up many doors in my professional career. So that'd be my other piece of advice: get in early and by using skill-based volunteering, you can feel like you're very confident that you can add value early on, because it could be as much as just using your spreadsheet skills and analytical skills could be what that charity needs. It doesn't have to be, many, many years of professional experience that you're bringing to bear.
Love it. Thank you very much. I mean, for those people listening, we wanted to finish with a few top tips about finding your the first volunteer role and what might be best, for you. I think the thing that I know Alex would agree with, he sort of mentioned it right from the beginning, is volunteering is a labor of love, and you really need to find a cause that you're passionate about, because you do need to invest some time and maybe sacrifice a few evenings instead of watching telly, spending time with your friends to work, and support a charity. And if it's a cause that you feel passionate about, you will not begrudge those hours in a second. We find that it's a really humbling experience. And Alex referred to the volunteering bug before. People typically end up giving a lot more time than they ever expect to at the outset, because it's such a humbling experience and a rewarding experience, seeing the difference that you can make. So that would be the number one tip: find a cause that you really care about. You want to make sure that you do your research and understand the expectations on you in terms of the role that you're taking on, the time commitment, and be really open with the charity, as Alex said, about how much time that you have to give and any parameters that you might need to work around, like if you're not free at certain hours, etc. All of that stuff is helpful to share up front. And then we often refer to try before you buy. So you don't need to go straight in as a trustee. It might be worth taking on a role just as a finance volunteer, maybe helping with a specific task or project that a charity would like support with, and really kind of going in and making sure that the culture is right for you, that you support the work they're doing, that you understand the commitment before you fully get involved as a trustee.
Yeah, and Alice, on that one, I mean, that was very much, I see that as that sort of parallel between what I started as spending time in schools just reading with kids to then wanting, I remember speaking to someone in the school and them saying, oh, we should really think about becoming a school governor. And, and you could bring a lot of your skills from your work life. And that was then the spur to then look, and get in touch. And I just got in touch with a local school here in Brighton, and just emailed them directly and said, do you have any roles coming up? And they invited me in. And within a couple of weeks, I joined the first meeting. But they did a similar approach too, which was they were very happy for me to join that first governor meeting as an observer if I wanted, rather than necessarily commit. So yeah, I think that's a really great suggestion for anyone looking to volunteer.
And then I suppose once in role, making sure that you schedule your time up front, as Alex referred to. And I think really, I mean, Alex again alluded to this in terms of being a non-executive. There's a lot of listening that's needed. I think particularly making that transition from the corporate sector into the non-profit, like they have very different challenges and priorities. They're looking after communities in need, and so sometimes the policies and procedures might not be as rigorous as you'd expect to see in the corporate world. But I think as long as you go in with that attitude of wanting to learn and find out more, you will do well. And then also remember where you can go for support when you're in role. One of our visions at Charterpath is creating that community of finance professionals who volunteer. We've got mentoring programs available. We've got loads of resources on the website in terms of frequently asked questions, volunteer stories. We run events such as this. And so please, really, I'd like to finish with a shout out to join Charterpath. You can do so for free on our website and join the fastest growing community of finance professionals who volunteer. So I think that covers everything. And I would like to open the floor now to any questions that we have from those people who are joining us live today for this podcast recording. I think, do we have one in the chat? Well, Kemi, sorry, yes, Kemi, would you like to raise a question?
Yes, I've got a couple here to ask. Some for you, Alice, so you can be on the other side.
Oh, this is good. Go for it, Kemi. It's payback.
And the first question is how are you, Alice, balancing juggling sort of both volunteering, paid work, board role, and the family, which I think is very sort of quite prevalent in this day and age where people increasingly have sort of complex family structures, be it caring or parenting responsibilities, and lots of other tasks and demands on their time, and would probably love to volunteer, but can't necessarily, again, to your earlier point, think that they can fit it in. So it'd be good to understand how you're finding it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kemi. I mean, I think Alex touched on this a lot. Can be difficult at times. That involves so much juggling. But I think for me, it's what Alex said. It's around preparing and scheduling time up front, like the joy of voluntary roles, less so with children and young families, is that it's flexible. And so you can often work with the charity to set aside, what time suits you best. So all the charities that I support are really flexible about when we have trustee meetings, and they're diarised, long time in advance, but also move to different times of the day or week, depending on what's going on. So that's hugely helpful. And then I think being realistic about what you can achieve, and so making sure you do set aside sufficient time, communicating really clearly with the charity about what you can give. And then the final one would be setting boundaries, which is something that I'm definitely trying to learn, saying no when you know that you don't have enough time. Again, it's not so easy with children, but with a charity, just recognizing what you can take on and what you can't. And there have been times where I've taken maternity leave from a volunteering role at a charity too, just to give myself a bit of a break. And as Alex said, most charities are so grateful for any time that they can get, and that it all makes a difference. So it's an ongoing juggle, but it's an amazing skill to learn that is so relevant in your corporate life too.
Yes.
So for me, it's been very beneficial.
I think one thing like that, Alice, you probably don't give yourself enough credit for, is you are probably one of the most productive people that I've ever worked with. And I think that is, and I think that is relevant in this, because the point you said about being kind of realistic, what you can do. There's one thing to block the time. There's another thing to be productive in that time. And I've found that sort of transition to more of a sort of portfolio of time. You can sort of get your diary to be sensible in terms of got time for this, got time for that. But you have to try and produce the output in the time window that you set aside, because it's not like you've got one line manager that you can go to just saying this task has taken longer than I thought, because they'll understand you've got lots of people that you're potentially trying to sort of satisfy or manage or ensure that they stay kind of productive themselves. So I think there is one about being realistic, but also really making sure that in the time, maybe that sort of adage of sort of progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
And, making sure that you get things going and that they can iterate maybe beyond your direct input. But you probably are the most fiercely productive person that I know. You make me feel guilty.
Kemi, did you have another question as well?
Yes, two more questions just to challenge you both. The second one is with respect to the board roles and the charity roles, do you get paid for those?
Yeah, I can cover that one, Kemi. It's a really good question, because I've been asked that a few times. I have almost like the full spectrum of activities that I'm doing at the moment. So I range from kind of completely pure like volunteer, either trustee or school governor roles, which are unpaid. They are, it's very clear they're unpaid. What they will often cover is required, for example, like expenses related to you doing the role. So it could be that's to travel to a meeting in London, for example, or equivalent. So, but it's very much typically restricted to that. Then in my board life, I have a full spectrum from like entirely kind of commercial non-exec director roles, which pay, almost like a bit like the equivalent of a salary essentially for a certain number of days or time in your year. So it might, you have a contract and it might specify 20 days and we'll pay you, X £1,000 for those days. And then I also have a non-exec director role, which is in essentially it's in a government-backed entity. So we've had funding from government. And that one is, you do get a number of roles, sort of non-exec director roles there, where they're not purely voluntary. It does have sort of a level of pay, but it's much lower, and it reflects the fact that that entity in itself is a non-profit. It's, you're using government funds, and it's more about what you're giving back to society in that non-exec director role, rather than my other roles, which are like, highly commercial, high growth organizations that are looking to generate, kind of profit and value, where, the pay reflects that. And these organizations are much more about serving society. So the pay, again, it tends to be more reflective of sort of the cost of you doing that role. It goes beyond expenses, but it would be at the lower end. So that tends to be the kind of the spectrum of what I see in that space. And it's worth even, linked to that, even on charity roles, understanding things like expectations for attendance of meetings in person or not, what will they cover in expenses or not, just to avoid confusion or misunderstandings there. Particularly if you're having to travel, for example, long distances to attend meetings. It's definitely worth clarifying that up front and being clear on that before you commit. Hope that helps.
Yeah, really useful, thank you. And finally, a question for you both, time permitting. I know this is very sort of close to Charterpath's heart, but in terms of volunteering, diversity is an issue that comes up frequently, both in terms of visible characteristics, be it race, gender, disability, but equally those sort of non-visible ones. So it could be people have neurodiversity or other conditions that they don't necessarily want to disclose. How would you encourage somebody who would like to volunteer but perhaps looks at the current board of trustees at Rowan, doesn't see anybody that looks like them, and maybe thinks that those roles aren't for me because I don't feel represented in that structure?
Yeah, I'll start then and then hand over to Alice. So, I mean, what that question is asking is absolutely right. So right now, 92% of trustees in charities in the UK are white, 2/3 are male, less than 3% are under the age of 30. And it mirrors that trend of people often, sort of late stage of their careers, but then it's a real network play, and it's sort of, people are tapped on the shoulder for these roles. And that's historically has been the model. I think, focusing on the positives, we're starting to see a shift now, which there are many organizations and groups, um, advocating to bring greater diversity and particularly relevant, diversity of perspectives, lived experience, and being for the trustee boards or the school governor boards to be more reflective of, the recipients of those charities or, the school, for example, where, I'm a governor as well. So I think there's a big drive towards that, which I think is really important, and having much fairer processes to apply. And I think actually it goes back to like a parallel I see in my own sort of volunteer and professional career has been turning it on the other way around and going, actually, what makes you different becomes your superpower. For me, one of those was, coming from a finance background and going from being like total nerd at school and loving maths and learning, something that becoming almost like a superpower that can help wedge that door open. And I think that's why there's a lot, increasing opportunities for people from diverse backgrounds where charities are actively looking to increase their ethnic diversity or actively increase their gender diversity and turning that on its head and making those attributes of yourself a superpower to secure the role in an organization that you feel passionate about and that you are happy to volunteer your time towards.
I would agree with everything you said, Alex. And the message that I would give to people, as you say, Kemi, that are looking at these role descriptions and thinking, oh gosh, I'm not sure if this is me, or that I can't see anybody in the board that looks the same way as me or has had similar experiences, almost go to the charity that you feel passionate about and share who you are and what you want to give. And as Alex says, there is so much interest from charities in having people from different backgrounds with more relevant experience to them, that I'm sure they'll be grateful for any time that those individuals can give. So don't be put off by the fact that you can't immediately see something, because we know that that's an issue and we know that we're trying to change it. So sort of back yourself, go share what you can give, what you would like to do, and I'm sure that they will bite your hand off to get involved.
Yeah, and the only part I would add to that is that linked to our efforts over the past year at Charterpath with the mentoring program, I think it can be really helpful to secure a mentor who has broken through that sort of perceived ceiling to secure those roles and to, represent, a demographic that's not typically seen. And it could be a young trustee, it could be, a female chair of a charity board, but find the person who is a role model to you. And again, what you'll often find is that if you reach out to these people directly and you explain your situation and what they represent to you, you'll often find these people will agree to mentoring, and then they can give you the support and advice. And it's back to that concept of sort of they've made it up the ladder and they're lowering that ladder to bring more people up, with them. And I think you'll find that a lot in the charity sector, which I think is one of the things that make it so special.
Thanks,
Really
Alex.
advice.
Thanks, Kemi, for your questions. Really considered, very grateful for your time. I think that finishes off our session today. I want to thank you, Alex, for sharing your experiences.
No, thank you.
I've had a privilege of working with you for probably too many years now, but you really have had the most amazing career. You're a brilliant leader. I can say that from experience of working for you and now with you, and really grateful for you taking the time to share your experience with us.
No, thank you, Alice. I think you've earned your right to be the ongoing permanent host of the Chart Your Path podcast series based on today. So maybe I need to hand that mantle over to you. But yeah, thank you for the really good questions. Like real privilege to share my experiences. I'm really happy if people want to get in touch.
I was going to say,
you can find me on LinkedIn. Do send me a message. Get in touch.
At charterpath.org.uk. Both Alex and I have access to that, and we would love to hear from you. So thank you to those that attended, and look forward to the next event in the Chart Your Path series.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.